They are suspending the search for tonight. Utility pole that was struck by the suspect who was driving the truck. The water main broke just behind me. Inside this hole is where the crews are working to fix it. Now, there was a deadly officer-involved shooting. That shots were fired shortly after 9 o'clock tonight. And what began as a search effort is now a recovery effort for those two missing teens. An election and their disapproval of the country electing Donald Trump. That it was a female motorcyclist who was killed this afternoon. This is as bad as they've ever seen it. So it is bitterly cold. Now, we're not actually on the ground level. We are 50 feet up. This ultralight aircraft falling from the sky and crashing here on the ground. This pair of boots, it's all that's left behind. The U.S. and Cuba trying to fly past more than 5 decades of Cold War feelings. He shot himself in the head with a handgun, and if anybody needs to go inside to use the emergency room is blocked off, but if you need to get inside, use the main entrance. That the deputy ordered the gentleman several times to put down the knife, and then unfortunately had to fire 3 shots and killing that 43-year-old white male. The man is armed with a shotgun behind me in the 2400 block of Norcrest. We also learned that this began as a domestic dispute sometime around 6:30 earlier tonight. Well, I can tell you that the police standoff is taking place about 100 yards behind me, and it is taking place on a house on the left here at Miller Street. I can also tell you that there is an extremely strong police presence involved in this. Now, what we have been able to hear from police, they've confirmed that this is a shooting investigation. They said they got the call just shortly after 8 o'clock that inside this car, there were 2 people inside the front seats, a 19-year-old female passenger from Muskegon and also a 26-year-old male also from Muskegon. They were inside that car when shots rang out. I was able to hear from a witness here on the scene who said they heard several shots. After talking with Captain Bride from the Muskegon Police, he did confirm that at least 3 shots were fired at this car. You can see it's just riddled with bullet holes, windows blasted out. You might see those yellow plastic cones on the ground. Those are for police to mark evidence as they're investigating the scene. Captain Bride said that he did see several bullet shell casings there on the ground as part of the evidence collecting. I've seen about maybe 6 police cars, around a dozen officers here investigating the scene. Again, they did say that this is a shooting investigation. It's early on in the investigation. They did say by the time they got here, whoever was behind the shooting, whether it's a shooter or shooters, they had already left the scene. So they are beginning their investigation, trying to find a motive and find out exactly what happened. As for the condition of those 2 people, we haven't been able to find out if their injuries are life-threatening or just not severe. The Kalamazoo community is still mourning after a driver slammed into a group of cyclists, killing 5 and injuring 4. We are just moments away from the beginning of that press conference where investigators and authorities from multiple law enforcement agencies will be addressing the media, trying their best to explain what happened earlier. A few hours ago, I was on the scene where what can only be described as a horrific accident did occur, and there was such a great presence of authorities there. I saw about 4 or 5 fire trucks, law enforcement from various agencies. What we were able to get confirmed by police is there was 9 victims in this accident when a pickup truck slammed into them as they were driving down the road. I actually heard from one witness, though, that it looks like he was almost hit by this person also. We're trying to get confirmation of how many people were injured. Okay, we were just hearing from the Kalamazoo County prosecutor. He was updating us on what happened earlier. He informed us that they do have the suspect in custody. He has been identified, and he told us that 5 people were killed in that horrific pickup truck plowing into a group of bicyclists earlier tonight. 4 people are being treated at a hospital for their injuries. He said those are serious injuries. Would not go further into that. But again, 5 people died in that accident earlier tonight, which happened around 6:30. He did mention that the person in question, the driver of that pickup truck, that they had got some calls earlier in the evening, about 28 minutes before the accident happened, that person described in that truck was driving erratically. They are going to be investigating this with multiple law enforcement agencies. Again, those 4 people are being treated for their injuries. 5 people died, though, earlier in the accident. He did say, though, that they were all on bicycles and None of the people injured were children. So we do know that they were all adults and they are all on bicycles. 5 people were killed, 4 people being treated for those injuries. The man is identified as a 50-year-old man from West Michigan. That's as far as the prosecutor would go into describing his identity. They said that he will be formally charged on Thursday. And I want to go ahead and toss it back now to Christian and Janice.
Michael, talk really quickly about how they caught this suspect. We understand that his vehicle was disabled, possibly from the damage of hitting those bicycles, right?
Well, Christian, when I was on the scene earlier, I actually got a view of the suspect's vehicle. The front was severely dented in, and that the prosecutor said that his vehicle was disabled after the accident, and that the suspect was found not far away on foot, not far away from the accident. That's where he was apprehended and taken into custody. So apparently the severity of the impact was so strong of hitting those bicyclists that it broke his truck, and he was trying to get away on foot before authorities got to the scene and apprehended him. Not too far away from the scene of the accident is what they said.
Okay, and we know that we heard that charges could be likely by Thursday. What did the prosecutors say about the victims here? We mentioned once again there were no children that were victims tonight, but we know 5 dead, 4 injured. Do we know anything about that group of bicyclists tonight?
He was being very guarded with the information about the bicyclists, whether or not they had done this before, if they were related. He did say it looks like they were just a group that met up and went riding. Some other information of importance was that it appears that the truck hit the group of bicyclists from behind. So they were on the right side of the road going with traffic up a hill, and he came up from behind and just struck them from the backside, causing 5 deaths and 4 injuries. Something else of importance, perhaps earlier, I saw on scene that an ambulance was being escorted by 2 police cars. So it looks like that might have been the ambulance taking the suspect away, that they were guarding that ambulance very carefully.
Fox 17's Michael Dupre live out there now. Michael, what can you tell us?
A group of 4 teenage boys came out here today. Sadly, only 2 went home, and what began as a search effort is now a recovery effort for those 2 missing teens. They just were not able to get past that rip current, and there were some very hazardous swimming conditions, strong currents, also waves 5 to 8 feet reported out here tonight. So just very, very hazardous conditions, and it looks like it was just too strong for those teenage boys to swim across to get back to safety. Fortunately, 2 of them were able to climb to rocks to get to safety. Unfortunately, 2 of them were not. Yeah, hello, good afternoon, guys. Well, the water main break happened right around 3 o'clock this afternoon, and they have got the water shut off. Now, the sheriff went on to say that this is just a very unfortunate event that happens. He says no officer wants to be involved in a shooting like this. No department wants to be involved in an officer-involved shooting like this. He says it's just a very sad and tragic thing that happened. But in his words, that the officer involved in the shooting had no choice because, again, the suspect was approaching him and threatening him with a very large knife. So that's when the deputy fired his firearm 3 times, striking and killing the 43-year-old man that lived in this apartment behind me to the right.
LA they have demonstrations, New York has demonstrations, Chicago does. Why not Grand Rapids?
So these people are very vocal about what happened in the election and their disapproval of the country electing Donald Trump. They were in favor of Hillary Clinton and what she stood for, and they're in great disapproval of what Donald Trump stands for.
Michael, what are you learning?
Well, Annie, the latest is right now, Consumers Energy really has their hands full trying to repair the utility pole that was damaged as a result of the crash. I'm going to step out of the way so you can look. The pole on the right is the one that they just planted into the ground. The one on the left was damaged when the suspect's truck plowed into it, breaking it apart. And police tell us that suspect, after causing this crash, ran away from the scene but was taken to custody shortly after that. I did speak to some people who've lived here for years, and they telling me that this is simply the worst accident that they've ever seen happen in their small, quiet town.
Outside and bam, loudest crash.
It was a big old boom.
That loud sound was the crash of a truck plowing into a car here at the intersection of Heights Ravenna and Main Street around 5 o'clock Tuesday evening.
And this truck just blew by my house. I mean, I could feel the power of the truck just woof. I mean, it just exploded past my house.
The truck split a large chunk off the utility pole, almost knocking it completely down. People who witnessed the crash say they also saw the suspect running away.
Dude ended up jumping out the truck, took off running, almost had him. But
You almost caught him?
Almost caught him. He ended up running to the back.
Others went to help the people injured.
Seen the people crawling out of the car and went around and seen the other passenger that got ejected.
Michigan State Police say one person was airlifted to the hospital. The other two were transported by ambulance. Troopers used canines to track the suspect down following the collision and say that they were taken into custody about an hour later.
Pretty bad accident right here.
All right, the latest I've heard from Consumers Energy, they're telling me that they're hoping to have the lights turned back on in about a few hours, hopefully around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Michigan State Police are also handling the investigation into this crash. They're letting me know after they apprehended the suspect, he was taken into custody and is at the hospital. The other 3 people who were injured in that car, their condition is unknown at this time. Her relationship with the suspect, Matt Hartman, had been rocky in recent months, but that she never imagined that their volatile marriage would spiral out of control, leading to the violence that we saw over the weekend.
His mental health deteriorated, a lot of anger issues, a lot of jealousy issues. He snapped.
Mary Hartman was married to her husband, Matt, for 6 years. She says that she recently filed for divorce and was moving on.
Me and Matt might have had our issues, but I didn't want this to happen.
On Sunday, she says the darkest hours of their marriage happened when they drove from their home in West Olive to Muskegon. She says that Matt had a gun and told her he was going to use it on her friend, Jordan Carey.
Jordan answered the door, and then he seen me sitting there, and he tried to tuck and run at him and try to tackle him off of the steps. And that's when Matt shot him in the head.
Jordan Carey's life came to an end that afternoon, a man that friends say will be dearly missed.
Jordan was a real, bright individual. He was loyal to a fault.
He was a genuinely kind-hearted person. He always managed to keep a positive outlook despite all the disadvantages that were thrown his way.
Mary says that after Matt killed Jordan and injured another victim, 25-year-old Mariah Cantu, he drove back to West Olive as she frantically called family members and texted police for help.
I was supposed to die Sunday. There's no doubt in my mind.
Back at their home, police surrounded the house.
He brought me out of the house at gunpoint, and I'm looking at all of the cops and everybody over here.
As law enforcement ordered him to put the gun down.
And he leaned in and whispered in my ear that he loved me. And then 5 officers said that he went and put his finger like he was gonna pull it, and they had to do what they had to do to save me. I didn't want this to happen. And if I could take it all back and take every single bullet that he had on him to save this from happening, I would have.
An autopsy confirmed that Matt Hartman died from a single gunshot wound. This cross is just one of the headstones that were vandalized here at the Lakota Cemetery. Someone came and did a lot of damage. Here's another headstone that was knocked over. Some neighbors discovered the damage, and now they're left wondering who did it and why.
I just was sickened by this.
Authorities in Van Buren County are now looking for whoever vandalized the Geneva Township Cemetery, knocking down and defacing headstones.
Just think about the families that you're hurting. Some of these headstones are over 100 years old, and so they're not going to be replaced, but hopefully we're going to try to get them put back, up on the base of it. Just think about the other, the people that you're hurting and the disrespect you're showing to other people.
They believe the damage was done Saturday night and were tipped off when a neighbor noticed the damage.
Unbelievable that somebody would, be so, immoral to do something like this.
The destruction caused by people who must not care or realize how it will affect the families who come here to pay their respects.
It's just sad. It just makes me think that people don't think. They think in the moment, probably intoxicated moment.
This cross, because it actually goes for that monument over there. So somebody took it off of that one, carried it over here, and must have slammed it over a granite headstone to break it like that.
The Van Buren County Sheriff's Office is searching for those responsible for damaging these graves. They'll be facing malicious destruction of property.
Michael Dupre joining us live from the newsroom tonight after speaking with their neighbors about this latest development in this odd case. Michael.
Derek, Annie, this all began on May 18th. That was the last day that Teresa Lockhart was seen. Ever since then, friends and family have been desperately searching for answers. And while her husband, Christopher Lockhart, was arrested several times on unrelated charges, he was never named a suspect in the case.
It sounds like, he killed himself.
A neighbor who lives a few doors down from the Lockhart home is shocked that the only person of interest in the disappearance of Teresa Lockhart is now dead.
My hope was that he would, potentially go to jail and at least get out of our neighborhood by losing his house or something.
The neighborhood was blocked off Tuesday as police collected evidence and removed Christopher's body from the scene. Investigators say they discovered he was dead after going to do a welfare check on him after he didn't show up for his scheduled report time at the Kalamazoo Office of Community Corrections.
If he did do it, I hope that he leaves some explanation of what happened to her, for her family, maybe where her body's at.
Christopher Lockhart had several run-ins with the law in a 1-month span after his wife's disappearance. Starting with an incident on July 6, after police say he cut a neighbor's cable and air conditioning lines. That was followed by an arrest for suspicion of drunk driving, then violating the terms of his bond, finally for tampering with an electronic device. During his 4th arrest, investigators say he had a passport and large amount of cash on him, something neighbors call suspicious.
Maybe they were getting closer to him, and that's why he knew his time was running out. Obviously, you'd like to see him serve trial and, look at the families in the eye.
Teresa's car was found a couple of miles from her home at a park and ride. During the investigation, police say that the case could be a homicide and that Christopher has been uncooperative.
To find out exactly what's happened to her, is I think what everybody wants. Obviously, a lot of people in the neighborhood, including myself, have thought that he is guilty.
Well, just weeks after Teresa's disappearance, Fox 17 did get to do an interview with him, and he told us that, Christopher told us that he felt victimized in this case. He did not speak to us again after that, though. And as for today's discovery, police did not elaborate on exactly what evidence was found at the home when they were searching that scene. We did reach out to Teresa's mother and also her sister, who did not want to comment at this time about today's development. Meanwhile, the search for Teresa does continue. If you do know anything, you're urged to call the number there on your screen. Live in the newsroom, Michael Dupre, Fox 17 News.
Fox 17's Michael Dupre spoke to the man who's traveled the country in Moon Tower. So, Michael, he's got to be pretty broken up about this.
Yeah, he's taking it really hard. There was a lot of history in that Volkswagen van, Janice. Its previous owner took it on tour with the Grateful Dead. And Joe Henderson didn't just use Moon Tower to get from point A to point B like a lot of us do in our cars. The two of them experienced life together.
It's my friend, my best friend.
This is Moon Tower, after a year of hard work restoring the iconic van. But when Joe first saw it, it was a run-down, rusted wreck in someone's backyard in Denver.
Yeah, that little van had a good body on it, and he looked like he needed to live and drive some more.
He felt an instant connection and a kinship develop. Joe, spending all his time and money to restore and modify Moon Tower.
Ate ramen for a year to get this thing going. Put a refrigerator in it and full solar panels, so it had full 110 power.
And if you're wondering about the name, Joe's friend came up with it from the movie Dazed and Confused.
Why is it called the Moon Tower anyway?
He said, this is the Moon Tower. So it is a tin can, and it does look a lot like a water tower.
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into bringing Moon Tower back to life. And Joe says that's what made their bond so special.
Yeah, the Moon Tower really turned into my best friend. He was there for me whenever I needed him.
Together, they toured across the country, making each stop a new home and new experience in life.
All the different experiences I went through just really changed my life and really made me find out who I was.
The adventure ran into some trouble August 3rd. Going to Grand Haven, Moon Tower's engine was running hot. And when Joe pulled over, the engine exploded in flames.
It was on fire completely. There was about 10 to 15 of the Coleman camp fuel canisters in there, and they just kept exploding. Windows were popping out one at a time. And I just watched the windshield and the grill and the lights just eject out of the front of the van as that last explosion went out.
Joe says Moon Tower was like a brother.
It was hard. I didn't know what to do.
Joe lost everything in the van fire, but his friends are helping him get back on his feet. Thursday night, they held a Jammin' for Joe concert fundraiser.
I feel so honored.
Joe knows life won't be the same without his four-wheeled best friend, but he knows he has to move on and continue on the road of life. Well, Audrey, I can tell you that this is a great place to be to ring in the new year here at the Allegan Riverfront. I can tell you, though, it is bitterly cold. Now, we're not actually on the ground level. We are 50 feet up, right next to what the ball is going to be dropping from. I'm going to step out of the way so you can take a look at the ball and the crowd that's here to watch it as it drops. Now, as I said, 50 feet up in the air, and it's going to be dropping in just about 2 hours. Well, let me first begin by saying that there is still police activity at the scene behind me here as they process the scene for some evidence. That crime scene tape right there, that marks off the home in question, as this quiet neighborhood earlier today was overrun by dozens of police vehicles. It was a very large law enforcement presence on scene as authorities were responding to calls of shots fired. This all began around 5 o'clock this afternoon at this home, which is off of Riley Street near Westland Court. Now, officials say that the call actually came in from a family member who escaped the home, and we're told about 5 to 6 relatives live there, and police tell Fox 17 News that at least 3 family members made it out of the home uninjured before the gunmen opened fire. It was an intense scene, a very heavy police presence. Around 7 o'clock, the tactical units tried to make contact with anyone inside the home where the standoff was taking place. And at one point, we were actually in an apartment right next to this home as deputies had their guns drawn. When no one responded at the home in question, crews breached the door.
And then through the course of that entry, they found 3 deceased individuals in the home. So the 3 deceased individuals appear to be killed from a gunshot. There's 2 males and a female deceased.
Tonight, they are confirming that a suspect fired shots at a house just behind me down here on Fernando and on the corner North Avenue. They're saying this happened right around 9 o'clock, and there is a police presence behind me actively going on. They have the street blocked off. I've seen maybe a dozen cops going up and down the street with flashlights, obviously looking for somebody, looking for something. Nearly everybody that I talked with today said the same thing. Around here, this is as bad as they've ever seen it. In fact, it's gotten so bad that Riverview Drive is not just taking a view of the river, it's actually become a body of water because of all the floodwaters. But they will resume looking again tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning. Meanwhile, the family's pastor says that they're still holding out hope. However, they're beginning to come to terms with the reality that, in all likelihood, Riley is gone. Nathan Sims, loved by his family, loved by his friends, and loved by his community. It was at this very spot that Nathan breathed his last breath after being gunned down last night. Tonight's vigil will continue as long as there are people out here showing their support, wanting to say something to remember Nathan Sims. And earlier tonight, it began around 8 o'clock. It will continue for much longer. There was around 100 people here earlier celebrating at this vigil. Now, the mothers that I spoke with, they both are wondering about the big question of why. Why did this happen? Why was there a shooting last night? And who did it? As of right now, they haven't got those answers, but they're hoping that during the investigation by police, they will be able to find out why this happened. So far, though, police have not made any arrest in this case. They're still searching for a motive, although they have talked to some persons of interest. Live in Muskegon, Michael Dupre, Fox 17 News. Large police presence here got a little bit larger when they actually had the robot come out of the bomb squad van and advance inside the emergency room. And that includes multiple law enforcement agencies, including Grand Rapids, Kent County, and Walker. Now, here's what we do know about this standoff. We know that it began just after noon today. The Kent County Sheriff's Department telling us that a man in his 20s and his girlfriend were holed up inside the house. It could possibly be because of some domestic issues or because of a threat of suicide by the boyfriend. Authorities confirming he does have an armed gun inside the home.
Now, the girl was released from the house around 3:45, so currently it is only the male inside the home that negotiators are trying to talk to and convince him to come outside of the house. I can also confirm there are multiple SWAT and tactical teams involved in the standoff, including a command bus, a Bearcat, an armored Humvee. They are taking this act of vandalism very personal, and it really is a shameful act of vandalism. This is just one of the headstones that were damaged. Today was a very hot day, so they're going to look into whether the heat may have played a role. A lot of questions remain on what happened that night, how did things get out of control, and what caused the fights that led to dozens of arrests. Police saying that they have plenty of evidence that she wanted the father of her kids dead. The motorcyclist at one point was speeding the wrong way along I-196, even taunting police, encouraging them to chase him. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Michael Dupre. This is Fox 17 News at 11. President Trump says his Secretary of State should not bother trying to talk to North Korea. Round one of the world's largest art competition is now in the books. A driver cruising in the passing lane repeatedly slams on the brakes to get cars off his tail. Only this time it causes a major crash and he just drives away. There's a lot of questions surrounding what exactly constitutes a service animal. So today, a Pleasant Dog held a workshop in Grand Rapids to help people understand the facts. We have some breaking news out of South Haven tonight where police say North Beach is being shut down, saying it's no longer safe. Calls about some unruly people starting to come in around 9:30. The pet store is calling foul play on that one, but I'm glad to see that the person who was putting that bird on layaway, something I've never really heard anything about. I didn't know you could even do that, but he must have really liked the bird a lot.
Yeah, well, he was wondering if you're going to bring that up. You know, as a Tiger fan, it's been a rough year for me, but I'm hopeful now that Les Miles is gone. You know, he was a great coach, but I think we need some newer offensive mindset in that game there.
Do you think he's gone for good? Because remember they tried to fire him last year and then he came back.
I know the backlash was so severe. They're like, we got to keep the guy, but.